Hey there, everyone. This is Dave Dubeau with another episode of the Property Profits Real Estate Podcast. And today we've got a special guest. Well, we always have special guests, but today's guest is even more extra special in my mind because Zac Killam is a real estate entrepreneur. He's a lawyer, and he's involved in something that's very, very important for all of us who are landlords, and he's part of a company called Landlord Credit Bureau. So Zac, welcome to the podcast. And before we dive into a little bit about yourself and your background, why don't you tell us big picture, what is the Landlord Credit Bureau and why is this, well, in my opinion anyhow, something that's so important in the real estate industry?
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate being here, and I would love to tell you about Landlord Credit Bureau.
Yeah.
So Landlord Credit Bureau has existed since 2012, and its mission is essentially to improve the businesses and lives of landlords, property managers, and responsible tenants. And so what it's doing, just like other credit bureaus such as Equifax or TransUnion, is we're bringing accountability and transparency and balance to our industry, being the rental real estate industry.
All right, so Zac, what need does the Landlord Credit Bureau fulfill? Because again, a lot of landlords out there kind of have the gist of it, but a challenge that a lot of small landlords have had over the years is they get a tenant from hell, and there seems like there's just no way to find out ahead of time if they're going to be a nightmare. We've got our hands tied legally. What we can ask, what we can't ask. There's challenges with, being accused of discrimination if we don't let certain tenants in. So it's really kind of tough for a lot of landlords to do proper due diligence on the people that they're getting into their multiple $100,000 assets as tenants. So how does this Landlord Credit Bureau help in that scenario?
Yeah, great question, Dave. Thank you. So what Landlord Credit Bureau is doing is we are essentially a central repository of tenant records. So landlords are able to report register their tenants with us and then report their monthly payment habits. So did they pay on time? Did they pay late? Or did they not pay at all? Then in addition to that, they can share reviews about their experience with that tenant. And so then this is all forms part of the tenant resume or the tenant record, which is then accessible to future landlords when they're looking at an application to potentially rent out their unit to an individual.
Now, doesn't that open up the possibility for litigation? If you've got a pain in the ass tenant that's late on payments, or it's damaging the property, that pulled an all night and pulled a midnight move on you, something like that, and you report that to the bureau, and the tenant finds out, isn't there some risk of them suing you for whatever?
So the reason that we're able to do it is that the bureaus are governed by, of course, applicable privacy legislation federally and in the respective provinces. Now, federally, the legislation is called PPEDA, the Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents Act. And in BC and Alberta, they actually have their own acts called PIPA, the Personal Information Protection Act. And all three of those acts are very similar in that they allow landlords, credit grantors, to report to bureaus if they're doing so for the purpose of collecting a debt. So in the instance, of course, where a tenant has caused a bunch of damage, didn't pay their rent, moved out in the middle of the night. Also to investigate the breach of the agreement, as well as to prevent and stop fraud. And all three of those things Landlord Credit Bureau helps our members with. So, of course, anybody could sue for anything, but they're not going to win.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Good.
Maybe I can just follow up on that. In our history since 2012, and we have now about 34,000 landlord property manager members across Canada and the US, no one has successfully brought a privacy or any other action against our members or us for using Landlord Credit Bureau.
All right. Very, very cool. So let's say I'm a small landlord. I'm interested in this. It sounds like you've got a lot of people already involved in this, but obviously, well, not obviously, but I'm assuming it's still kind of the tip of the iceberg, or correct me if I'm wrong. How likely is it if I'm a member of the Bureau that if I type in somebody's name, they're actually going to show up on there. Is it work like at what stage of general use is the whole bureau at this point? Because we know for our own credit scores, yeah, I mean everybody in every single person in North America has a credit score for good or for bad. But how many tenants have their own quote unquote credit score with the bureau?
Right, right. Well, there are tens of thousands, but of course that's across North America. Now, when searching our database, if a particular individual's record is not found, there's of course no charge for that. But what we also do is enable the pulling of credit reports from the big bureaus like Equifax.
Cool.
So even if we don't already have a record for that particular individual in our database, we're still going to facilitate the pulling of the credit report. So it will not be empty-handed. But one important note to touch on is the real major impact of what Landlord Credit Bureau is doing is it's really managing tenant behavior after they move in. So what I mean by that is we're enabling landlords to register a trade line on each of their tenants' credit reports. So what this does is it impacts their credit scores on a monthly basis based on if they choose to pay their rent or not. And so personally, what I found is that over my course of being a landlord, because I'm a landlord as well, and I actually became a customer of Landlord Credit Bureau before joining it as CEO. And the reason I became a customer is that I've also, I should mention, been a tenant for many years prior to becoming a landlord. So I personally understand, the issues and the emotions that face both tenants and landlords in their relationship. And I looked at Landlord Credit Bureau when I found it through a Google search, and thought this is brilliant because what it's allowing is me to reward my good tenants, the tenants who are just being responsible and just adhering to the terms of their contract, of which is the vast, vast majority. And it's enabling me to stop the delinquent tenants who are choosing to be delinquent. And so how it allows me to do that is by registering this trade line on their credit report with Equifax in Canada. Trade lines have an impact upon your credit rating or your credit score. Whereas a public record, which is what collection agencies report as, has no impact on your credit rating. It's just a notice. So we report in the same way as credit card companies do or other credit grantors. And it then has an impact on a monthly basis. So this is really exciting because I have lots and lots of wonderful tenants, and many of whom have become lifelong friends as a result. And having been a tenant myself, I always wondered, why am I not getting credit for this huge payment each month, yet I'm getting credit for paying my $65 a month cell phone bill?
Right.
Doesn't make a ton of sense from my standpoint. And so Landlord Credit Bureau, it changes that and enables us now to give credit to all these wonderful tenants, as well as encourage them to have a reason to keep paying on time and in full every month, because now they're actually getting a benefit from it. And this is, of course, particularly relevant in jurisdictions where we have eviction freezes and where maybe the legislation is particularly tenant favored.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense, Zach. So it's the carrot and the stick whole scenario, right? So hey, you know what? If you're paying your rent on time as you're supposed to, as is laid out clearly in our contract, which you have signed and I have signed, then you're going to be rewarded because we're going to report this positive behavior to the credit bureau. It's going to help build up your credit, so you can do all the great stuff that people with good credit scores can do. On the other hand, if you screw up, if you choose not to pay and you choose to be delinquent, then it's going to affect your credit score negatively, and that's going to hang around for quite some time. So yeah, that's really smart. So Zach, let me ask you this. So again, I'm just thinking from my own point of view as a landlord. So let's say I'm kind of new to this whole concept, and I'm in Hoboken, British Columbia, middle of nowhere, small town kind of thing, and not a lot of people are doing the whole Landlord Credit Bureau thing. How would I get started, knowing full well that most of my tenants probably aren't registered in the system yet? So let's say I join the Landlord Credit Bureau. How does that kind of look? I've got a vacancy. I've got a few applicants that have come in. How would I make the best use of the bureau?
Great question. I haven't heard of that town in BC, incidentally.
Yeah, I haven't.
So as a landlord, you can get started immediately and you can actually register all of your existing tenants as well.
Cool.
So right from the get-go. So there's a couple of different tracks which let's discuss. So the first one is, say you have all great tenants and all of them pay on time every month, and you just want to do it as a benefit to help their credit score and also give them a positive tenant record with LCP that they're going to then use and when they're applying for future places to rent. So what you're going to do is you're going to log in and you're going to register those tenants. Then those tenants are going to get an email from us welcoming them and letting them know of the benefits. And then they have...
So quick question. Do you need their permission to put them in the system if they're already existing tenants?
No, you do not. You don't need consent. But I'll explain the particulars of that. Okay. So for the good tenant who's always paid you on time and doesn't owe you a debt, they're going to receive this email that welcomes them and invites them to opt in. So they're going to have the option whether they want to opt in or they don't want to opt in. If they choose not to, you as landlord can still have that record with LCP, but you're using it for your own internal purposes. Should they choose to opt in, either by giving you consent or by giving us directly consent, then we can register that trade line and start benefiting their credit report. Now, before any landlord in the future can search our database, of course, they always have to have consent of the applicant or the potential tenant before they're allowed to look at these records. The same way as you have to have consent before you can pull a credit report. Now, for the delinquent tenant, so someone who is paying you late or owes you a debt, under PPEDA and PIPA, the acts I mentioned previously, you do not require consent under those exemptions. So the exemption of to collect the debt, investigate the breach, and prevent fraud.
Okay.
So 2 tracks. Now, the third way is that we actually provide some legal clauses that for all landlords, whether they're members or not, free of charge, and to be included in your application for tenancy and your lease. And these then are consent clauses and notification clauses. So they serve 2 purposes. One, they're telling the tenants who know that they're going to be delinquent tenants, the serial ones you mentioned earlier who move from place to place and continue to cause damages and not pay rent because they know how to game the system. It's going to most likely cause them to not rent with you. So you're going to eliminate the headache right from the get-go. And the second is then that you are in fact getting that consent. And it's always good to, of course, to get people's consent up front.
Oh yeah, no, most definitely. So let's just rewind a second there. So for the good tenants that we're not having a problem with, we can register them and they can choose to opt in or not. But if they don't opt in, then are they still registered? Are you still doing the stuff or it's not?
Yeah. So you're still gonna register them. You're still gonna be recording on a monthly basis their payment habits. Mm-hmm. It's just that it'll be for your own internal record keeping purposes. So we won't be sharing it. We won't be registering a trade line. Now, at any point in the future, should they wish to opt in, then they can, and then the record is there and it's flushed out and beneficial to them. Conversely, if at any point in the future they decide to be delinquent and to stop paying you, now you no longer require consent. So instantly that record is going to start reporting a trade line on their credit report with Equifax.
Perfect. Okay, now that makes complete sense. Awesome stuff. So, Zac, tell us a little bit about, because I'm sure all the landlords out there that aren't part of this already are thinking, hey, this is sounding really good. How does it work? What are the costs that are involved? And if people want to find out more and join up, what should they do?
Absolutely. So go to landlordcreditbureau.ca in Canada and .com in the US. Mm-hmm. And it's free to sign up. You don't have to enter your credit card. And you can use our basic plan for free. So you can actually start to enter your tenant records and do some of the reporting. And then there is, of course, a premium plan, which has some additional features available to it, which is only $20 a month plus 60 cents a tenant. So very, very inexpensive. And what we see is that for our members, we're reducing their delinquencies and their debts by 30 to 50%.
Oh God, that's huge.
So it's huge. And
wow.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. I mean, this is really brilliant. I feel like a dummy because this is the first I'm really hearing about it. So
well, that's my fault.
Thank you very much for sharing that. That's for sure, Zac. But yeah, I love the fact that it's a carrot, it's a reward for your good tenants, and it's a good kick in the ass for the not so good tenants that'll hopefully get them on board. And if not, it'll help, other landlords in the future avoid renting to these people if they're a complete nightmare. That's for sure. So
that's exactly it. And I also, it brings some balance back to the relationship, and that, there is some rewards for the people who are just being responsible.
yeah,
And, when I first moved out from my parents' home, as first year university, the credit, industry decided that I was only worth giving a $300 credit card to. So that was my limit. And, what can you do with $300 in credit? Not a ton.
Buys quite a bit of beer.
Fair, very fair. And that is yes, something I used it for on occasion. But having said that, now as landlords, we get to do something, give back. And so for that young kid or that person who's new to the country, who's just trying to build their credit, and as you said, get access to all the great benefits of having a credit rating, we can assist them with that, and we can help them do it much more quickly, because now they don't just have the $65 cell phone bill on their credit report. They now have their $1,200 rent payment as well. So it's nothing but positive for everybody who's being responsible and just adhering to the terms of the agreement that they signed.
Exactly.
And it's only the delinquent tenants who have intentionally decided to not pay that, of course, don't like getting caught. And on that note, if you don't mind, I just want to mention in our current times with COVID, where obviously a lot of people are being financially impacted, I really want to stress this is not a negative for people who are financially impacted by COVID. As long as they're communicating with their landlord and are creating some sort of payment plan, partial payments per month over the next X number of months, this is still a benefit. So those payment plans can be registered by their landlords with us, and therefore then they can still build a positive tenant record with the Landlord Credit Bureau, and they can also still benefit their credit report. Even though they're not paying the full amount, as long as they're adhering to the terms of their payment plan, still a positive, still going to increase their credit rating.
Fantastic. One question that came. Does this work for commercial tenants as well as private individuals?
Not at this time, unless the individual has personally guaranteed or personally signed the commercial lease, in which case...
happens. Yeah, that's true.
Which
happens quite often as well. So, yeah.
It does. So in that case, then yes.
Excellent. Zach, great stuff. Congratulations. Good job. Keep up the good work there. And again, let's just put that URL out there again. If people want to connect with you or they want to find out more, where should they go? It
is landlordcreditbureau.ca in Canada and landlordcreditbureau.com in the US.
Great. Thank you very much. This has been very, very educational. I think it's an amazing service. So
thank you, Dave. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Take care. We'll talk to you on the next episode. Bye-bye. Well, hey there. Thanks for tuning into the Property Profits podcast. If you like this episode, that's great. Please go ahead and subscribe on iTunes. Give us a good review. That'd be awesome. I appreciate that. And if you're looking to attract investors and raise capital for your deals, then I'm going to invite you to get a complimentary copy of my newest book, right back there. There it is. The Money Partner Formula. You can get a PDF version at investorattractionbook.com. Again, investorattractionbook.com. Take care.